As people are still continuing to join, I want to welcome everyone so much for being here. My name is Kristen. I'm with the Newfoundland Labrador Federation of Cooperatives. We're really happy to be hosting this webinar today with our amazing speaker, Natasha Hart. So before we jump in, I'm going to just give a little introduction for Natasha. So Natasha is an award-winning educator who has been teaching for 21 years. She has taught grades 5 to 12 in Prague, Mainz, Montreal, and St. John's in both public and independent schools. In Montreal, she was head of fine arts at Lower Canada College. 9 years ago, Natasha returned to St. John's and found her home at Lake Crest School, where she teaches IB. As a grade 6 teacher, she has developed a strong social justice curriculum where students spend 6 months exploring topics under the umbrella with barriers to equality, sharing finite resources with other living things, and conflict resolution. Her classroom practices focus on active collaboration and understanding how to work through different viewpoints with respect and connection. Natasha runs the art club and the GSA at her school, volunteers for Multicultural Day, Truth and Reconciliation Week, Earth Day, and runs an Eco Warriors team at her school. Natasha volunteers for the Social Justice Cooperative, co-admins the 2S LGBTQIA+ mutual aid group, and facilitates human resources for Perchance Theater, and chairs its board, serves on the Federation of Cooperatives Education Committee as well. So she's very busy. She's also the proud mom of a dynamic 12-year-old and loves to hike and practice her art in her free time. So we are very, very happy to have her here today. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Kristen. That was a fantastic intro. And wow, that makes me feel like a very busy human when you put it all together on one little blurb like that. Folks, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to explore a little bit with me the ideas of collaboration, community, how we can really start from the bottom up in terms of our young leaders and children. And they're not just leaders to be, but they're leaders in their own right now. And so I'm excited to share with you today. Just want to make sure, if Kristen, you could give me verbal confirmation. Can everyone see both me and my PowerPoint currently? I am indeed the speaker highlighted.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. First, folks, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. Of course, in schools and all across this country, we are focused on truth and reconciliation. And for me, as an educator, it's really important to involve my students in that conversation. And the students in my school are the ones who lead land acknowledgements during assemblies. And so it was only fitting that we worked together to come up with one that really resonated with children. So I teach in a K-9 school currently and have taught high school for quite some time as well. So this is how we start. So we say, let's start by connecting directly with the land. I encourage you to ground your feet. So we'll ask participants, and you can as well, ground your feet on the floor, feel them on the ground. And so while you notice your feet on the ground, I would like you to think about these words of acknowledgement. This land is special. We must take care of it. This land is old, and we must remember it. This land is borrowed, and we must not forget. This land is borrowed from the former Beothuk people and Mi'kmaq people. It is borrowed from the Inuit and Innu people, and we must not forget they are here. We say to them in their land, we say thank you. We acknowledge our school is in the ancestral homeland of the Beothuk and Mi'kmaq people. We honor them. And in terms of Newfoundland and Labrador cooperatives and how this is connected to cooperatives, you will see as a cooperative entity, we recognize that the spirit and principles of cooperation have been nurtured and practiced by First Peoples since time immemorial. And we commit to upholding the aims of truth, reconciliation, decolonization in the work that we do. So thank you for that moment of contemplation as we think about how we work with other people and we're grounded in this place and time. Kristen did a wonderful job of introducing me. So I just have some of my passions there, being near bodies of water, campfires, berry picking, travel, and family, of course. And my sweet spot has always been teaching middle and high school. And I've found myself teaching grade 5 and 6 since I've returned to Newfoundland. And it's been a fantastic journey. So I hope I can share with you today and continue to collaborate. So here are the goals of our session, and I encourage you, if you have it available, to have paper and pen handy. If you are someone like me, you might want to take notes, but also I might ask for you to take a moment to reflect on something. And if you do that with writing utensil and paper, that can be useful later on. It is your choice, but that's something you can have handy. So we are going to be understanding cooperatives and their values and principles. We're going to learn practical strategies for teaching cooperation. And many of the strategies I use, again, can be used in office spaces with adults. I have used them in context of grade 5 plus, and they can certainly be adapted for younger learners. And we're also going to explore transdisciplinary and community connections. And so I bring you to the first question. Now, I always like to think that we're all starting at a very simple place. So some of you joining today might have extensive knowledge of cooperatives, and some of you might be very new to cooperatives. So I like to just start at the bottom and get our basic form. What is it? What does it look like? So we're answering those questions first, and that's my approach to teaching. And I looked at this in child-friendly language. So first of all, of course, we know cooperatives, or we may not, exist in every sector of the world. They are social enterprises. You can register a business or organization as a cooperative, and a cooperative is owned and operated by and for the benefit of the people at the heart of the organization. So people are independent. They have the freedom to govern themselves. They're united voluntarily to meet common needs. So they may focus on economical, social, and cultural ones. They do this through jointly owned, democratically controlled enterprises. And that democratic idea is very important in decision making and something we will be talking about today. So Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Cooperatives is a local group in our city who support and help cooperatives. We will hear more about that. And also, I was invited to sit on one of the on the education committee. They have many committees. And so I'm happy to be part of this incredible organization. And so when we look at principles, I would like you, if you are in education, to think about how these practices could be helpful to you in your classroom, or to you in your business space or in your nonprofit. So the principles of cooperatives are voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for the community. So I know in my teaching, concern for the community is paramount to everything we do in terms of our reflection of the bigger picture. How can we work together to create the world we want to live in? Who are we cooperating with? Maybe we're cooperating with another class to do a collaborative piece. Our whole school needs to cooperate together. And that autonomy and building that sense of autonomy is really empowering for kids. There are also values of cooperatives. So cooperatives are based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. Cooperative members believe in the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. For those of you familiar with the IB philosophy, so In my school, I teach two curriculums simultaneously. We all fully and completely teach the Newfoundland curriculum. And we also teach the IB curriculum, which is an international worldwide curriculum. And our principals are fostering and getting children to reflect on what it means to be caring, what it means to be open-minded. We talk about international mindedness, and we think that, and we understand that other people can hold different viewpoints from us and they can still be right. That we have discussions about different religious practices, different lenses in the way we approach the world or how we grew up, our cultural connections. And so being principled, honest, really understanding our personal rights. In terms of our class, we have the right to our education, and what's our responsibility to make sure everybody gets to experience that same education. So you can look at the concepts, look at, and even bring these into your classroom and ask, what do these words mean? How can we foster this sense of belonging here? And the more I do this, I'm working right now in a smaller school, and I've worked in large high schools. Booth Memorial was one I worked at the beginning of my career, and setting up classroom spaces where students felt heard and able to express themselves was the foundation of being able to do so much great work with them. And it's hard to accomplish sometimes. So I'm here to talk through some of the scenarios and some ideas, and everything you can alter to make your own. So let's take a look at local cooperatives. One of the important things, of course, is for us to connect our students with community. We often investigate, what problems do we see in the world? What can we do to help mitigate those problems, or how can we make things better? We look for the helpers, we look for solutions, and we look at community-based organizations. So for example, if you see here a picture of Newfoundland Composting Cooperative, they're newly have become a cooperative. And so they are providing a platform that enables members to compost in Newfoundland and Labrador by sharing resources. They have compost literacy, education materials, data and research, and site development. So this is a cooperative people can join locally. Fogo Island Cooperative has really put its name on the map. We have seen documentaries made about Fogo's revitalization due to the formation of the co-op, and they are a community-based enterprise comprised of both fish harvesters and plant workers. So you can see the economic benefits of cooperatives, of looking at different ways of fostering both community development, solid infrastructure, stability, and sustainability. And then, of course, we also have childcare cooperatives. So this one in particular is from Port aux Basques. And the focus is to commit to advance the social, educational, and personal growth for children under its direction. I've known about cooperatives for quite some time and have been part of a not-for-profit group and cooperative. And I actually was astounded in the past year to learn how many cooperatives are in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so it is an interesting investigation to just take a look at websites and inform yourself and students about what cooperatives are doing. So cooperatives in the classroom, these are sort of the big picture understanding, and I'll get into some finer details of practical exercises and things that I do. But just in terms of looking at the big picture, so we are, Canada is a founding member of the International Labour Organization, and Policy 193 supports revising cooperative laws, raising awareness of co-ops, and looking at government organizations, workers' organizations, trade unions, and employers. Also, we look at 193 requiring cooperatives to be included in the curricula at all levels of national education systems. So this isn't something that we, and I know as teachers, we often feel that we have to justify the work that we do by hitting our curriculum outcomes, by making sure that we are covering everything our students need to cover to succeed, to be able to go on to the next level. And oftentimes I find when you design fantastic learning opportunities, you're really going to hit on all those curriculum outcomes. And at the same time, this is just to give you a little extra information to use in talking to administration, for example, or the school board to talk about how cooperatives and understanding cooperative learning and cooperatives themselves are really important in the classroom. So developing curriculum, promoting cooperative education in school systems is a goal, an expressed one. And so that's the overview. And so now I'd like to go into the smaller details of the collaborative skills I teach. And if you look at these, I can imagine that you can make connections. You may want to think for yourself, because this is about you really thinking about how does this apply to my current circumstance in my office, in my organization, the board I volunteer for, in my classroom. And so collective decision making is really important. Knowing rights and responsibilities and honoring those, knowing how to resolve conflict, because conflict is a natural part of any space, and knowing how to work through that is great power. And metacognition, who am I personally as a collaborator, and what does that mean as I interact with other people? What I also know is that students don't naturally have a sense, children don't naturally have a sense, and many grown-ups have not learned this either, of really how to collaborate in terms of actively listening. Are we listening to other people's ideas just so that we have the airtime then to voice our ideas? And sometimes if we're really passionate and excited, we might forget that we really need to actively listen. We also need to help kids succeed. So the way I do this really is through skill focus. Here is a skill. We will model it. What will that look like? Now let's practice that skill. How do we do in that skill? And so we're very aware that we're working on it. I feel that when we tell kids, okay, get into a group together and figure this out, sometimes, of course, through play and learning in many different situations, they really will brilliantly figure things out. And that's part of learning as well. But when it comes to academic pursuits or great compromise, that can be really hard in an academic setting. And so I really believe in teaching kids these skills. So the first thing I look at with students is collective decision making. And so I will place my students in groups. So these are some pictures of my students, of course, with their faces blocked out for their protection. And so I'll start with something like, today we're going to work on making decisions. Let's write a list of ways in small groups to ensure that all voices are heard when it comes to decision making. And I also talk to them about how our goal is to ensure that everyone is part of the decision and not just that one person, the first volunteer, the loudest or the most authoritative person is making the decisions for the group. So how can we create that democratic model that where everybody's voice is heard? And so I will ask them, for example, how can you show you are listening and understanding what everyone has said? So we might say something like, I really like the idea of, and reflect it back to them, and also, and then you're building on that, or, and I'm going in a different direction. And so you're respecting and listening to what was said. Also, the big question is, how can you make the quietest or most contemplative teammates be given the space to share their ideas? I know you may have students in your class who have slower processing. You may have students in your class who are extremely shy or unsure in the social dynamic of how to express themselves. And they do need to learn how to jump in. They do need to learn how to, take a risk. And at the same time, it's also the other group members' responsibility to make sure that space is given for that. And so it really is a balancing act. So we brainstorm these ideas. So this is one thing that we do quite often. As they write their list and communicate them, they sort of become an essential agreement for how we will continue to move through whatever activity we're going to do. Another prompt I will give is rights and responsibilities. How do we treat each other? So I'll ask, how do you like to be treated? And oftentimes I'll get quite positive responses. However, I also acknowledge that some kids, you will see, will say, oh, everything rolls off my back. You can say anything to me. And it's maybe, some sort of a tough act or something like that. And so I will ask, how do you like to be treated? And then I also ask the question, think about a good friend of yours or a sibling. Think about someone really kind. How would you like people to treat them? And so sometimes if they feel like they have to project a certain persona, you might be able to get them to think in a different way of looking out for someone else. How do you want people to treat people in general? How can you value an idea but also suggest an alternative? So I really appreciate what you said, and I'll just add on to that, or, et cetera. And how can you help people stay on task? And this is a tricky one. We don't want our students policing each other, but at the same time, we want them to encourage each other to say, hey, okay, we only have 5 minutes to finish this task, so let's focus up. And how can you do that in a way that is encouraging rather than, punitive or judging in some way? And all learners, of course, have different needs in that regard. I'm sure many of you have learned about the conflict resolution practices of restorative justice. I have learned of restorative justice from an Indigenous lens and Relationships First Newfoundland and Labrador. And I have received training. Many educators in this group probably have. And I find that it has different success rates. It really can be on the comfort level of the facilitator. But I find that modeling this really, really does help. I also am really willing to drop everything we're doing curriculum wise if there is a conflict, to give space to us to explore the process of hearing people's point of view and understanding what we can do with that. My first question as a teacher, when someone comes to me who feel that some kind of harm has been done to them through words or, push or something, is, what happened before, what happened after, what were the responses, and you're collecting that information, and then in a very non-judgmental way, and then you're talking to both people together and just talking through what could have happened, how it could have gone differently. And so while I use the circle method of passing around an object and we all talk about something, oftentimes it spans from PE, in my experience with grade 6, and students will come back and say, someone said I cheated and I didn't understand the rules. And so we'll just drop everything for a few minutes and say, we hear some frustration and we'll talk through it. And then the person may realize who called them the cheater, even though the rules were repeated twice, they didn't hear it. Maybe they were daydreaming. We all have different brains. And so we're working together to give people the benefit of the doubt. And then I don't force apologies, but I say, let's have time to think about this and how can you make this right? And then we revisit it. I find that my students trust this model so much. And And this isn't just blue sky world thinking. I've been in some very challenging classrooms, and with a lot of different behaviors, which stemmed from a lot of different, harm from children and society. And I have still found great success in this model. So across the board, in many different ways and places, I really support this. I also feel that my students really trust that both I care and that we're going to come to a resolution rather than feeling blamed, judged, and defensive. So it really is a great practice in your classroom. And I think that you can adapt that and find those ways. Also, the metacognition piece. And this is a place where you might want to use your paper and pen. And I encourage anybody, if you're not an educator, this is something that honestly I've done with the theater company I volunteer for, perchance with actors age 20 to 65. To actors 60 to 75. My staff, the staff I work with, as well as grade 5, 6, 7, 8, and onward. So this is understanding your own collaboration style. And if you look here, we have compass points. And we do all sorts of looks as a teacher, as educators of, how do I learn? How do I fit in? This is not multiple intelligence. This is very much, a little piece of the puzzle of how do I collaborate with others? So I will frame it to them as when you are working on a group project, which of these descriptions fits you the best? And I would like you to circle or number the ones you feel are the strongest. We all feel we are all of these things for the most part, but the one that stands out to you the very most is sort of the defining one we're going to go with. So first of all, we have north. North is acting. So, and by that I mean quick acting, quick to respond. And so somebody who would be in this compass point would say, okay, let's do it. Let's get it done. You can give them a task and they don't even have to know all the information. They're just ready to start generating ideas, or they're the people already, getting started, maybe even before they've heard everything. But they are certainly the motors. They're probably motivators. They have lots of ideas and they're anxious to get it done and jump in and do it. West, on the other hand, so if that's you, think about that. And you probably know pretty quickly if it is, if you're north. West is paying attention to details, like you need to know who, what, when, where, why before you act. And otherwise, what are the parameters of this project? What is my timeline? Is there a word length on this document? How big does this poster have to be? There are so many questions: who, what, when, where, why, that need to be rectified in your brain before you can continue on to the next step, because you're a planner and you want to see that fine detail. You want to know where it's going, that trajectory. And also you might even, again, in that micro way, be the one who's dotting all the I's and doing all of the editing at the end. That's important to you. We have South. South, caring, likes to know that everyone's feelings have been taken into consideration and that their voices have been heard before the group can make any decisions or do anything. And so you'll see students in your class or people in your organization who very much will have to check in and just say, just one moment, I just want to make sure. And also they will feel or notice how other people are feeling about the project. East is speculating. Where West would be the micro, looking at the fine detail and all of the parameters, East is actually pulling out to macro, and it is looking at the big picture and the possibilities before acting. So what are the connections? These might be my bridge builders, I would call them in my class, who make connections to their learning quickly. How does this impact other people? What systems are already in place? What is that big web? So they're looking at the entire, say, food web, the ecosystem, how that works, while somebody in the West will be very much narrowing down. So if everyone can take a moment and just think about, where would you be? Are you the one who jumps in? Do you need to know everything before acting? Do you need to have a good check-in with everybody? Or are you really thinking big picture ideas and building and making those connections? So once you decide, what I would then say is basically four corners. So anyone who chose North as their first one, you did that quickly, and that's how we know you're North. And anyone who's West, may have deliberated, as others may have. And so everyone goes in their set corners or their set spaces. And now I have a task for them. So hey, everyone in the North, what are your greatest strengths as a teammate? And so they'll reflect on that and they'll say, if we're on your team, we are going to be the engines. We are going to keep at it. We're going to give you lots of ideas. We're really excited and we're going to get going fast. We're going to be the motivators. West is going to probably say something like, we're the ones who, slow things down a little, make sure you stay on the track. So if you're North and you're the engine, we're laying down the tracks. We know where this is going and we understand the parameters, and we're going to make sure we keep things sort of tight and we don't go off too far on tangents. South are going to be the people who say, hey, we really care about you. And we really want to make sure that this is a shared decision. And we're really going to be beneficial because we're looking out for everyone on the team. And East will say, hey, we're going to see those. So this is all a well-oiled machine at this point, and we're going to bring to the table, that focus out. We're going to start connecting these big ideas, and we're going to make this project sort of grounded in place and time. We're going to understand those connections, and we're going to bring that to you. I'll also ask them, what do we feel other people need to know about us to trust us? So if you're in the North, you might say, hey, it looks like I'm recklessly jumping in, and maybe sometimes I will, but I still am going to help make really good decisions. I'm going to be, a motivational, great energy part of the team. West might say, be patient with us. We do want to get it right. Give us that time to do it, and we promise you it will be a great benefit. South might say, sometimes it's heavy being us. We actually really care about everyone. We feel and notice all of the things, and we just give us a bit of time for that. And we do know sometimes we need that extra nudge to move on with the next decision. And these are just some examples of what many people have said as I lead these in-person workshops. And East might say, sometimes we might get bogged down by these big ideas. We might get very philosophical, but let us, as my students would say, let us cook, let us stew, and let us do that so that we can really understand everything. So once your students know and have a sense of who they are, they communicate this to the group. So I use Padlet and have them do a full sort of summary of who we are, and then they also have to talk about valuing the other teammates. So I'll always say to them, if you're someone who's, jumping in, let's do it, then by all means, you're going to want somebody West, you're going to want someone East, want someone South. So they're learning also to appreciate other people. And here's where a big collaborative task comes in. Now I want to state that this exercise called the $1,000,000 gift is not my initial idea. It came to me when I was teaching theater in Montreal. It was about 15 years ago, and I believe it was in a book by David Booth. I have not been able to source it since. It's just one of those little activities that was in a book and that I've since sort of developed. But the zygote of the idea is actually from a theater book. And so this is how it works. I get the students in their groups and we review all of their skills. And we'll say, okay, so we're going to be making some big decisions today. How can you make sure everyone's voice is heard? How can you ensure that decisions are made democratically, et cetera, et cetera? How can you voice frustrations? How are we going to show up for each other today? And then I read the class a letter. So I make up the letter. Sometimes I change it in the year. So this is from Golfman Group of Investors. I make it pretty theatrical. So I say, hey, everyone. So in this activity today, I just want to let you know I received this letter from this investment group, and they issue grants to schools for improvements. So I'll read you the letter. Dear grade 6 students, I have an exciting opportunity to offer you. Our company has heard that you're an extremely bright, collaborative, and caring group, so we have a proposal for you. We will grant your school $5 million to improve your school in some way. Your proposal must have a theme, and we are interested in hearing from you by the end of the week. Good luck. Yours truly, Golfman Group of Investors. And so the students get pretty excited about it. Some of them will say, is this real? And I'll say, it's not real, but let's pretend it is. And so they get into their groups and they have to make these decisions together, brainstorm what would be, just say, if we could build another wing of our school, what would you really want? What do you think a group offering a grant would really appreciate seeing, and what would be of benefit for the students? So the space should have a dominant theme. So it might be, you might have a fine arts wing with a beautiful theater in it. You might have an athletic wing. You might have a medical wing. There's so many different things you could explore. They have 15 minutes. So again, I look at who's going to be the recorder, who is going to write down the ideas of the group. And then I'll say, oh, how did you decide that? And sometimes they'll sort of laugh and go, oh, it was just the first person who raised their hand. And then, and then we go back and sort of look at, okay, was there anyone else? And we'll review those rules. So remember, skills are meant to be taught, reviewed, and continued. Are they practicing the group skills they agreed upon, for example? And are all voices heard and validated? And then we start in part 1. So students have to appoint a representative. How do they decide to do that? Each representative communicates the group's proposal. I take notes to recap. And then I give feedback on ideas that investors may not feel are top priority or would. And then I very theatrically read the second part of the letter. Oh gosh, folks, sorry, I missed something. There's a postscript. You must spend the full $5 million on this one project. But the thing is there can only be one project from the whole class, and you have to all decide on the same thing. So now we have a situation where we have to have one united proposal. They go back. They revise their proposal, they make compromises, they keep in mind what the other groups have in common with their proposal. So they're starting to compromise and they're starting to make new proposals. Then another representative comes forward. They give their new pitch, keeping in mind common themes. And then we start a negotiation table. And this is a beautiful way to model with students shared decision making. I usually have them, I'll set up the desks in the middle of the room or in the middle of a table, and we'll all form a circle around them. And we listen to each group's representative representing their group's idea and starting to compromise with each other. And there's a great buy-in about this because then we open the floor for communication with their group, but they can only communicate through notes. So what will happen is students will say, oh, this person had such a great idea about that. Add that we're willing to compromise on that. And so there's a moment on the floor where you open up for notes and communication. The negotiators can write messages back to their group, but there's no verbal communication at this point. And of course, you can differentiate this based on your students' needs. But in this scenario, I've had all children able to write notes back and forth to each other. And so while this group is negotiating, we are reflecting on their compromise and we're talking through the skills. At the end, and this is really important for any group activity, we step back and we note things. So we'll say, okay, so you were in little pods and you made decisions together. Then you realized you had to perhaps abandon a really good idea so that we could compromise to come up with one unified project. Notice how the negotiators were representing separate teams, and you can imagine this as separate cooperatives. But once they come together, they're actually sharing a common goal, and they're not fighting or in conflict, but rather trying to find common ground. And these are really strong skills to teach your students. And so I have 11-year-olds who are really doing very well with this. The collaborative model prepares them, of course, for collaboration throughout their lives in many different situations. And we have this understanding that community works best when groups come together to share ideas, resources, and connections. So in this particular scenario, my students all agreed that they wanted to have a health, wellness, and science building. And they wanted some workout space and some relaxing spaces. And then they wanted to look at sustainable energy practices and with the goal of a cleaner, healthier world and student body. I also, and we'll talk about some other group activities, but I also bring things back to big questions. What happens when we explore alternatives? What happens when we take other practices in mind other than the practices we've always done? So for example, I'm a big believer in mutual aid. What that means for me is I have an abundance of some things. Most people have more things than they need that we can easily share. We are looking at a model where we're not giving charity, but rather we're mutually sharing resources that we have, and people's needs change over time. You might talk to your students about cooperatives. If your family has ever been involved with one, have you ever experiencing trading something or bartering something? Do we always need money for goods, services, and community care? So these are some big questions we can ask. Another little activity that I like to do with my students is to really compare and contrast some ways of gameplay. So in this scenario, when I borrowed this amazing game called Co-operative, it is a cooperative game where students are given an identity, points are collected, there is a payday. Everybody is going towards a common goal and setting up cooperatives, interacting with other cooperatives. And it's a brilliant way to teach kids about cooperatives. I was a bit of a risk taker and I decided to do it for the first time this year, and actually not teach them about cooperatives first, but rather have them experience the ideas and principles of cooperatives through gameplay, which, as we know, is a fantastic way to learn, and then to reflect on the differences in collaborative games and competitive games. I noted as a teacher that the same students who played Monopoly and who played Co-operative, every single time the group switched, the exact same behavior and the exact same volume was the same. So in Monopoly, the kids were way louder. They were razzing each other a lot with, look at me, cash money, you're going down, I'm going to win. And there was a lot of that kind of thing. And of course, we have playful banter when we play games like that. But there was a great difference in the way that kids were really paired against each other in Monopoly. And in Co-operative, when the kids were playing, same kids, they were so quiet. They had to listen to each other. They had to make shared decisions, and they were engaged every single step of the way versus waiting for their turn to come next. And so this is really modeling that idea of active listening, for example. Are you just sitting there listening to your teammate until it's your turn? Or do you have to listen to everyone so you can go through the next steps? I always make thinking visible. So I will give them flip charts and just say, can we talk about the differences? What do you think the differences between playing Monopoly and Co-operative are? And when they, write this out, they'll say, there are similarities, board games, et cetera. But the really big difference they found is they said we actually have to share resources to get points, but in Monopoly we had to monopolize those things, and we did not share in any way. And actually, the goal is to sort of hoard, not share. And they talked about how you actually have to work together to succeed in Co-operative, whereas you're a lone person in Monopoly. So, we talked a lot about that and just how different models and different ways of doing things can bring out certain attributes or competition. I've had a student this year say to me, I'm getting really competitive as we're, doing this trivia or something, and I don't like how I'm acting. So I think I'm going to take a step back. And that kind of regulation is amazing to see in young students, and is something, we're fostering. And that's a mega cognition piece as well. I want to let you know that I have given the people who are helping me moderate a link, and we're going to put that in the chat. And I do have resources from this session for you can use. So I do have a lesson plan for this activity, and I just wanted to tell you that when we look at cultural connections, and it's important, to make those connections in our world and make these connections that fit with our curriculum. And so exploring money lending practices across cultures has become something really fascinating to me. And so I've come to learn only in the past year that there are community-based lending circles. And so I have a lesson for you where you can explore how different cultures support each other financially. It's a great way to both math and economics to talk about, and anything in socials, to talk about barriers of traditional banking with high interest and debt, something I wish I knew in my 20s that I learned much later how to utilize systems in a smarter way or in ways that wouldn't bog me down. And when I say smarter ways, I mean I didn't know the resources that were available to me, and now I do know more resources that are available. Focusing on systems that promote trust and shared responsibility. And so there are many lending circles around the world. And I was really taken with this idea of Susu. This is one example. And this fantastic woman from Black Women's Professional Co-op, Juliet Kego Ani Ido, she gave this brilliant talk at a conference for Federation of Cooperatives. And so she taught us about Susu. This is not my cultural practice, and this information comes from research as well. But the idea is that a group of people, there's a treasurer, members agree on a contribution amount and how frequently they will contribute. So you could have a person contributing $100 a week. If you had 10 members, that would be $1,000 payout per week. So each member receives a lump sum during this cycle, and they can plan for things that are upcoming. So it's a way to encourage saving. It's a way to help each other in community that's interest-free, that doesn't involve banking practices. And it's really fascinating to see how it can work. So if you're a new business owner, for example, and you've received a grant for Upstart, but you need to go buy your materials first, and you don't have the money to be able to go out and buy those materials to give receipts to get your money, well, something like a lending circle is a really amazing way to ensure that you can take out that money and then you can pay it back to the group lending circle over time. So I do have connections to that you can look at with your students. Of course, we're always looking to make connections. So we have business entrepreneurship and innovation. We have social studies where students think critically. They learn about historical practices of decision making, ways of producing and distributing goods, border intergovernmental bodies, human rights, understanding cultural practices and community development and engagement, for example. We also, of course, have science, ecology, sustainability, climate change, weather and geography, and how they influence our decision making. Energy practices, rights and responsibility, and sharing finite resources. In math, we collect and represent data. We have economical calculations, money exchanges, problem solving. And so every time you're investigating cooperatives, practices around the world, you're also summarizing articles, researching, debating, writing reflections, writing persuasive speeches. There are so many ways for us to hit those curriculum outcomes. And this brings me to SDGs. And I'm going to move through these a little quickly because I see that that I've filled up the time fully. But SDGs are Sustainable Development Goals. This slide actually was created by one of my 11-year-old students last year, and I just took her name off the slide for her privacy, and she gave me permission. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are an urgent call for action by countries, developed and developing, in a global partnership. And this is from the United Nations. We, in Canada, we're helping to advance the goals through dialogue, participation, and collaboration. Progress is shared responsibility. It requires the whole of government and the whole of society to build stronger, safer, and more inclusive communities that leave no one behind. And the United Nations will provide, and the governments of countries in the UN will provide information on what their progress with the SDGs, and they get sort of a report card. UNESCO is also affiliated as well, and teaching this green mindset and education for sustainable development is very important. We look at good governance. So, of course, eradicating inequality, justice, equality, democratic member control, and cooperative enterprises are well-suited business models as the generation and wealth are distributed equally. We have creation and maintenance of sustainable enterprises and jobs, and I have included information as well for you to look at this website and get some more information. We have transparency, responsibility, accountability, participation, responsiveness to people's need, and respect for the rule of law. And so this is how governments connect to to sustainable development goals, but it's also what we really want from our students in our classroom. So our classrooms can very much model a society that we are looking to attain. Um, we are deeply rooted in local communities. We enable even the poorest to participate in economic progress. We foster opportunities for decent work and social inclusion and promote direct participation and control by members. And so here are the SDGs. Just today, I had my students are working on projects related to sharing the planet, resource distribution, inequality, conflict resolution. And just today, we went through all of the SDGs, and they had to write down the numbers of which ones pertain to their topic. There was so much buy-in. There's so much excitement. And so this is a student from last year, and they were investigating poverty in the world. And so they read documents from the United Nations to look at what does no poverty actually mean? What are the indicators that, in what ways are we looking to eradicate poverty? Another student looked at minimum wage and how it's not enough for people to have their basic needs met. They crunched the numbers and looked at real, income tax statements and the idea of earning a minimum wage and being in debt. They investigated the cycle of poverty. This is all students' work. They looked at a living wage and decent conditions. And of course, they compared and contrasted a living wage with a minimum wage. And so, what SDG were they looking at here? Decent work and economic growth. They look at stats from around the world. So that's very much that macro, making connections, not just with the place where we live, but also with other communities. I also had a student look at housing and the housing crisis in Newfoundland and Labrador, who was part of this team. And she looked at sustainable cities and communities. And so your students, and I have included in my resource package for you, information about how these are very accessible to students, young readers. There is a guide to the SDG for kids, and I encourage you to take a look. And even if you're not an educator, by all means, you can take a look and inform yourself about the SDGs. It's something our country is a part of, and many places in the world. They also have a good news report. And so I encourage you to do that. I see I've taken up almost every breath of this time. And so as I conclude, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming. I'm going to open the floor to a few questions. I would like to thank our education committee, Newfoundland Labrador Federation of Cooperatives Education Committee, as well as Kristen, who is facilitating our meeting, Kristen Murray. I'd also like to extend a thank you to Memorial University Office of Public Engagement, Department of Poli-Sci, and the Center for Social Enterprise for making this webinar possible and my research possible. Shannon Fraser, who is wise and brave and all of the wonderful things that help make so much here happen. I will conclude with that and encourage some questions. I certainly know our time is precious, but I will stay around a little longer if people have some questions. So I'll open up the floor if my moderators would like to help with that.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Benjamin.
Hello,
I
Benjamin.
think I have a suggestion. I don't know whether um, the presentation, the information you gave out, if we can have it at the end of the Zoom meeting.
Absolutely. Natasha has applied a document. So Shannon popped it in, but I'm just going to copy and paste it down at the very bottom. And it is permissions have been shared. So that is there. I'm going to encourage people to write into the chat if they have any questions, and the moderators are going to field them and then ask me them. And thank you for that, Benjamin. It's popped in there again. I hope you can access it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Moderators, any questions you would like me to answer?
I don't see any questions now. Just many thank yous. Great presentation, Natasha. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat.
Welcome to people who have come from far and wide. There's someone from BC, quite on the other edge of our country. Hello to Kimberly. We enjoyed having you teach the students about sustainability and local eating with local fresh vegetables and fish caught from our waters.
Okay,
Someone has a question?
Oh. I can read it out loud. They have a question about the challenges faced by the educator while following the cooperative pedagogy model.
What specific, I'm just wondering with clarification about what challenges or the pedagogy you're specifically referencing. So I'm just going back through my slides and looking at, are you looking at principles? Are you looking at decision making? Are you looking at values of cooperatives? Was there any clarification on that question, Kristen?
Not yet, no.
They said that they
Yeah,
would
go
like
ahead.
to know what were the challenges you faced, for example, with co-opoly and monopoly.
Okay, beautiful. So the challenges are that a lot of children, of course, know how to play Monopoly, and it is a game that people are very familiar with. Some kids have exposure to cooperative games, and others have a lot of exposure to competitive games. And so we talk about competition, and we talk about playing sports and bringing your best and good, and having good attitudes and things like that. And so I sort of, I guess, anticipate certain challenges, such as, let's talk about our language. We're not going to use the term cheater, but rather we're going to be playfully curious about things we know or don't know. So we can ask people, did you know part of the rules are, et cetera, et cetera. It took more time for students, of course, to get to know how to play co-opoly. And also it's slower moving. So there are great opportunities to do charades or complete a task for points for your team. They really loved that and engaged with it. They really loved having different identities. But of course, you're always going to sort of it requires more patience for students to learn a new game and to slow down to understand the collective decision making. And it takes a little while to get used to, but once they actually saw the benefit of it, they really enjoyed it. And everyone said, absolutely, we want to play again. And we can see how it could change in various situations. Whereas in Monopoly, it's just kind of winner or not. I hope that answered your question well. I think that the challenge always is that you are. I think the challenge with cooperation is always that you are going to have kids who grew up differently, even in households, of course, from the same culture, may have different ideas about resolving conflict or what's permissible around their home at gameplay and things like that. And so as teachers, we do need to invest time. I will say, though, that time invested equals such great engagement and so much success. So I feel that you could drop days of doing any curriculum and just focus on cooperation with students or in a group, and what will happen as a result of you doing core focus sessions about collaboration will create much smoother environments. So you're always going to have a little bit of growing pains at the beginning to get kids to that place. But once you do, you have them, and then you reference that all the time. So even in my class, I'll say, remember the $1 million gift? Remember how we had to make very tough decisions? And then they'll say, yes. And so I'll say, we're about to do that again. And remember, let's talk about our skills. Staff member Megan and I played co-operatively with seniors from Killick Coast Seniors Co-op. That's amazing. It does absolutely have uses beyond youth, just as many of my exercises. Any other questions? Also, I saw a comment in there in India having a committee of money lending practices, and the activity I provided for educators is for students to research money lending practices in countries around the world, and the article they can read focuses on certain countries around the world, and India is one of those. Kristen, did you want to speak to, I know you had something you wanted to add at the end, and perhaps about the Co-ops 101 webinar?
Yeah, I've shared it in the chat a few times. So just check it out if you're interested. It's just a session we're holding on, kind of another overview of what a co-op is next week. So I think we'll probably end it there now since we're a little bit over time, but just want to say thank you so much, Natasha, for putting this wonderful presentation together. It was really, really inspiring and very educational to educators and other people interested in, getting our youth interested in cooperating with each other. So you did an excellent job, and we're really proud and happy that you were able to do this for us today. And a reminder again, everyone will get an email afterwards with some links and the recording and everything, so you can share it around. So that's it.
Amazing.
Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.